to me, a bold one is not somebody who is the greatest in their craft. The bold one is not the person that achieves ultimate excellence. Those are not, those to me are not descriptors. To me, a bold one is somebody that changes the status quo, that they are walking into their arena and they change how the game is played. And to me, that is the criteria of the bold one.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Unleashed, the fastest hour on the internet, where every episode we feature a best-selling author or world-renowned thought leader, all in the name of helping you elevate your leadership impact. I'm your host, Jeff Tetz, and I want to thank our season sponsor, PowerEd. PowerEd is an award-winning division of Athabasca University who partners with organizations looking for impactful online learning solutions. Their on-demand online offerings include leadership, project management, artificial intelligence ethics, digital transformation, embracing allyship and inclusion, and digital wellness. Check out the team from Athabasca University at athabascau.ca. My guest today is Shawn Kanungo. Shawn is a globally recognized innovation strategist and best-selling author. He previously spent 12 years at Deloitte working closely with leaders to better plan for opportunities associated with disruptive innovation. Shawn is a partner with Queen and Rook, where he advises leading organizations and executives on disruptive trends. His work and interviews have been featured in the Globe and Mail, The Guardian, CBC, and CTV. He's been recognized as Edify's Top 40 Under 40, and in 2021, he was named in Forbes as the best virtual keynote speaker I've ever seen. And that's not just a review from his mother. Shawn's content on innovation has garnered millions of views, respectively, across LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook. He joins me today to chat about his best-selling debut book, The Bold Ones, which offers a playbook for individuals to become bolder, to push their careers and companies forward. Shawn, welcome to Unleashed. I'm so excited about this conversation. I love the book, The Bold Ones, and Shawn, I gotta ask you, man. Like I've known you for a handful of years now. It's been such a pleasure to watch your trajectory and to watch your continued development and growth. Incredible, and it didn't slow down one bit in the pandemic. And the thing that's different about you now from the last time I saw you is you are a best-selling author now. What does that feel like?
It's been really, really humbling. It's been very, I did not expect the love and just people coming out of the woodwork talking about the book. You know, to be honest with you, I've been doing this thing where I've been putting out video content for the last number of years. And, video is instantaneous. You get the feedback right away. You can see if that video pops or not. But writing a book is years and years of work, crafting these stories, putting it all together. And then you have no idea how the reaction is going to be. And it could be a flop. It could be a hit. And I've just been overwhelmed with just the messages that I've been getting from folks that are not in my network, that I have never met in my entire life, that are sharing the book, that are buying the books for others. It's been the most unbelievable experience that I've ever had. So it's been great. And I need to take a second to step back and be grateful and reread all these messages because it's been incredible.
But I do want to talk about the book that has actually been written here, which is yours, The Bold Ones. What an engaging read that is from cover to cover, Shawn. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was thought-provoking. I laughed. It made me think deeply. There's some emotional moments in it. You share a lot about your own journey in life. So you really cover the gamut here. And I guess one of the central themes of the book is you're covering who you would consider to be some bold ones, like people like Cardi B, of course, and Drake are some of your favorites. I know that you're big into pop culture, but I thought maybe where we would start, what was the criteria for coming up with the bold ones? Like, what is a bold one?
Great question. To me, a bold one is not somebody who is the greatest in their craft. the bold one is not the person that achieves ultimate excellence. Those are not those to me are not descriptors. To me, a bold one is somebody that changes the status quo, that they are walking into their arena and they change how the game is played. And to me, that is the criteria of the bold one. That's what I've been really obsessed about. And I wanted to take the idea of innovators and disruptors and, dissect what it means to be a bold one. And what I did in this book was I tried to show all these different ways that you can be a bold one. You don't have to go off and be an entrepreneur or a founder. You can work within a company. You don't have to be ultimately confident and to go into every situation and have the decisions at your fingertips. I wanted to showcase all the different ways of changing the status quo. And the criteria of actually making the book were just, I'm just a student of history, of pop culture, of sports, of science and politics. Like I am so curious about the world, and I wanted to highlight people that really changed the status quo within their little field, within their little industry, and that's what I really wanted to do in the book.
And so the people that you're talking about in the book or just in the world at large, there's something inside of them that makes them follow their unique voice, right? There's something that, for whatever reason, they can't rest until they do the thing. And I think a common thread amongst innovation is that it often comes from some sort of pain or discomfort. So then, like, what do you think is the difference between the people that harness that pain and discomfort to become bold versus folks that don't do anything at all?
You're absolutely right that there is a big difference there, and I feel that when it comes to the bold ones, I feel that there are so many individuals that they're curious about the world. They are taking advantage of these opportunities of disruption. They are using tragedy to create their next adventure. And so the only thing I would say around the characteristic of the bold ones is really that these are individuals that are they're constantly looking, they're constantly searching, they're constantly exploring, and they're hungry. And many of them use the opportunities of defeat, tragedy, and whatever it might be to get to the next level. And you can do that in so many different ways. And I think in the book, we show all these different innovators and how they've gone off and done that. And ultimately, if you remain in the status quo, I believe that that's the dangerous place to be in the middle, to be mediocre, to stand still. Maybe it was, you could have done that in the past, but today, like 2023, to me, that is the most dangerous place to be. So I believe that the most important people moving forward you have to be bold, you have to be brave, in the book we outline so many ways of doing that.
And it's probably, it's painfully obvious to you, but maybe not to everybody else. Like, what are some of the challenges, or what are some of the drawbacks of staying the same, of embracing the status quo versus disruptive change?
To me, it's about, you can stay the same. You can stay at the status quo. But the reality is that most people that remain stagnant, they ultimately get disrupted. Listen, we live here in Alberta, and I see many industries. I'm not going to point to the industries in this session, but there are a lot of people that have gotten fat, rich, and lazy because they've been successful. And society has told us that once you reach the mountaintop, once you get to the top, enjoy the fruits of your labor. But my belief is that you have to continuously innovate. You have to continuously try new ways of doing things, because ultimately some technology is going to come out of nowhere while you are sitting there pretty and eat your lunch. And so you can stay stagnant. You could remain in the status quo. But to me, that's the most vulnerable place to be. And we saw that during the pandemic, that the folks that were nimble, flexible, that they were experimental, they were the individuals and the companies that were able to rise through the pandemic. And so I would say this: you can stay the same, you can remain in the status quo, or you can constantly be innovating and be nimble enough when the world changes around you that you're able to pivot and move. And to me, that's really, really important in this very competitive landscape.
You mentioned the pandemic, and one of the things about the pandemic is that it removed like the greatest excuse of all time for remaining stagnant is that I'm not capable or I don't know how. Like literally, we had close to 8 billion people on the planet within the span of 2 months that all had to adapt and change the way that they lived, right? Like people that said, oh, I can never work from home, or I can't conduct virtual meetings. Everybody had to change the status quo. And so the excuse that I'm not capable of doing it no longer exists. So I want to talk, Shawn, a little bit. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, many people had this revelation during the pandemic that I think there were some stats there that 80% or 88% of the global workforce said that their meaning of success has now changed. And, many people had an epiphany of where their life was going and the direction that they were going in. I was wondering if you had that epiphany during the pandemic, or if it forced you to change your behaviors or the way that you look at your business.
I think it changed in a lot of ways. And I mean, I think personally, it gave me a lot of courage. And I think because our business was pretty adversely affected literally in the first month. And so I think collectively and then personally, I think I started to say to myself, well, if our business might not survive this trauma that it's going through right now, I want to make sure I go down on my own terms. I don't want to sort of die with my voice inside of me. And I wanted to be as useful as I could to other people. And so the pandemic for me was really overcoming the fear of not having anything meaningful to say. The fear, the imposter syndrome, I was at battle with that more than I ever have been, and overcoming that battle and sort of winning that battle. And I wouldn't, as weird as this might be to say, if we could have nobody adversely affected in terms of their personal health, in hindsight, like I wouldn't take the pandemic back because it's meant so much in terms of creativity, reinvention, rejuvenation, excitement. I feel more alive today than I think. Like I was in a mindset before the pandemic of preserving what we had, just like you said. And we all get to that point in life where it becomes more about protecting what you've earned as opposed to going after something that you covet. And never mind the pieces around, like it's troublesome enough to stay where you're at in terms of the threat of being disrupted or becoming irrelevant if you cling to the status quo. But I like to flip that around a little bit and say, the way to live a meaningful life is to constantly live in discomfort, to constantly be pursuing something. And that's one of the from a business standpoint and a mindset standpoint, the pandemic has been a wonderful catalyst to remind all of us that is such an important part of a meaningful life. Now, I want to make sure that I come back to that, though, and just say that the pieces of the pandemic, obviously, that I wish never occurred would, the death and the illness and all of the health-related pieces. If we could find a way to go through a catalyst like that for rejuvenation without it being a health crisis, I would take that in a second. But we can't take that back. It is what it is. So we have to figure out how do we use that moving forward. And I think that was a great question, Shawn, but I think that's kind of how I've used it personally.
Well, and I'm inspired that it was a catalyst for you. And for somebody that's been working with innovators and trying to get people to adopt digital, We talk a lot about digital transformation and adopting new tech and adopting new ways of doing things. Like, I was actually inspired by the pandemic because to me, it actually burst the bubble. Finally, people realized that they needed to change. Finally, people realized that they needed to adopt digital. It was a great bubble that bursted. And I saw so many organizations that I work with that they literally like switched the light, and they were doing things that they previously said that they never would be able to do, or it would take 6 months or a year or longer to do. And so I was inspired by what people accomplished. And from an innovation standpoint, it was incredible to see, and just to see the innovations. And I was inspired by seeing everybody else's innovations. I'm just somebody that's always curious and hungry to see how people change and pivot and move. And it was really, really cool to see.
Yeah, it was. I know. I think that was a great discussion there, and I totally agree. It was like every single day you were seeing something from somebody that you hadn't seen before. And I mean, not only did it inspire you to reach for greater heights, and you were a big force for so many people, myself included, in the pandemic, but it also allowed you to build on their ideas, right? Which is such a fundamental part of innovation, is taking somebody else's concept and just finding a way to tweak it and make it your own, or put your own unique spin on it. Shawn, I know that there's going to be a lot of people tuning in today that are sitting on something, right? A great idea, some kind of a risk that they want to take, some kind of an initiative that they are just trying to find the courage to go forward with it. And I want to try as much as we can to leverage some of your insights, some of your research, some of your tools to show them how to get started. So if there are people tuning in right now thinking like, geez, I embrace the concept of being a bold one, I've read Shawn's book, or I'm going to, what are some things that people could do to start to take some small steps in the direction of becoming a little bit more bold?
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. This to me is one of the number one questions, is how do you get started? And I fundamentally believe it's finding the smallest problem that you are facing, or the smallest problem that you are trying to solve, and frame that within a very small experiment, very small team, very small sprint, and see how you can move the needle. I think that's number one. I think number two is that what many people get wrong, and I highlighted this in the book around the bold ones, is in the last chapter around disrupting a culture, which is, how do you create a narrative? How do you create a story around what you are doing? The reality is that today we are just we're consumed with content, people, ideas. We're constantly distracted. It's some people might be watching this now. They I don't know, who knows what they're doing. They may be on Twitter, they might be on TikTok. The world is so noisy. And to be able to persuade, to be able to get people along your journey and be part of your movement, and create that momentum with you, I think is so important today. I believe that might be even more important than the idea in itself, is to create momentum around it. So how can you tell better stories and narratives around what you are doing? And then ultimately, I believe in this idea of, like a fan base of one, or a follower of one. It's just getting one more person involved in your journey or your movement, and finding that champion within your organization, or somebody that aligns with your mission around the problem that you're trying to solve. It will make your journey a little less lonelier. So those are some of the ideas of how to start. And it's funny because I've been talking to my friends about this. Somebody asked me a question, like, if you were to like summarize all of management thinking into one sentence, I would say that it's just the Nike slogan, which is just do it. Maybe we could just wrap every single book up that we've ever read and just put it into that one line, because it's just a matter about going and doing it. And I think it's funny because I was trying to find a through line around all the bold ones. I was trying to find a through line of all the people that I highlighted, all the innovators that I've worked with. What is the through line to everyone? And the only thing that I could see is that really that the most dangerous people, and I say this in my keynotes and and it's a line that has impacted many people, is that the most dangerous person in the room is the person who's most afraid but bold enough to move forward. Like, do it scared. And to me, that is probably this through line that has that I've noticed across every bold one throughout history, is to do it scared. Just do it, but do it scared. So that's what I'd say to that.
If it's not big enough. I sometimes wonder if you kind of got to dip your toe in the pool a little bit though too, and it's like exposure therapy.
Yeah. And I believe in that too. You know, that's why the idea of taking a very small problem with a very small experiment is your way of dipping your toe. And to me, it's nonchalant. You know, many people, when they're within an organization, the reason why they don't want to try something new is because other people might think it's too big or too scary or too risky. And so if you can frame something in a very nonchalant way and create momentum around it, I think that's how you get ideas across within an organization.
Well, and you did that. You lived that. I mean, you right out of university, Shawn, you joined one of the big four consulting firms at Deloitte. You started doing things very differently. How did you build a community within Deloitte of allies versus instead of adversaries?
To me, you know, it's funny, like I didn't call myself the innovation guy. There was nobody that I didn't call myself the innovation guy. Nobody put me on an innovation team. But what I started to do was to run projects differently. In very small ways to start, right? You would incorporate different technologies, you'd incorporate different ways of doing things, you know, crowdsourcing, use drones, behavioral economics, behavioral science, incorporate that in the projects. And over time, what I did was I just built this muscle. I built the muscle of taking very small risks. I built the muscle of what I call being bold. And over time, as you create this muscle, more and more people around you start to believe that you can do hard things. More and more clients believe that you are capable of doing hard things. And slowly over time, people point to you and be like, that's the innovation guy. I'm like, what is that? What do you mean? What do you mean I'm the innovation guy? And over time, you know, that becomes your brand, because it's not about your designation or your title or anything. It's the work. People see the work. And so that's how I really built a muscle around innovation, is by just starting small. And then over time, you gain the trust and you gain the resources of others to do harder things. And so that was kind of the trajectory.
Well, and it makes me think a little bit about begging for forgiveness instead of asking for permission. And I have to wonder though, Shawn, and going back to your own experience, like I think there are things that are maybe non-negotiable in terms of being a good employee, and then there's areas where maybe you feel like you can take some creative liberties. Like how did you or try to figure out where that balance was, like where you kind of had to do the tried and true process, where as opposed to other areas where it was a bit more of a playground, or you could get away with maybe pushing the envelope?
Well, I was lucky. I was part of a large organization. So I guess in a large organization, you, I don't know. I feel like you have more freedom in a sense, because there's just so many people. There's so many numbers. It gives you there's less of a microscope on you in that sense. And so I definitely took advantage of that. So circumstance was, favorable for me. But, to me, it was always about doing something radically better than what the firm could produce, or what the company that you're in could produce. And every time that I would push the line, or somebody might push back on me, I said, listen, if you can produce something, or your team can produce something fundamentally better than this, 10 times better than this, or not even 10 times, just even better than this, then I'll stand down. At the end of the day, let's go back to what our goals are, which are to, make sure that our clients are happy at the end of the day, and they're actually achieving their visions and the goals. And so there are definitely times where I got pushback, but I also had to stand my ground, because a lot of the times when people, they push back, it's because they're coming from a place of fear. They don't know how somebody else is going to react. They're coming from a place of, I've never seen this before. And so if you can convince them or persuade them that this might be a better path, and if you can get other champions along the way, like I did, one of the secrets is that every time I would start something new, I would get co-conspirators around me to believe in what I was doing, to persuade them that I was along the right path. And so when there was pushback, I would have, some folks around me that would have my back. So that's like one of the secrets of trying to push your ideas forward, is to find champions around you. And it's funny because I guess the other sort of secret is that I learned is that everyone loves a little bit of status. What does that mean? People may not know what you are doing, but if they can get credit along the way of doing something that's innovative, then they're more likely to signal to others that they're trying something new. And it's an elegant behavioral hack that allows you to try cool new ways of doing things. And so I would recommend people to try that. Give people credit and status, even though they don't need it or they don't deserve it.
You said a lot there, Shawn. That's really profound. I mean, very early on, and you were calling that story, one of the things that really stood out was with this notion of kind of being like undeniably exceptional, like just delivering phenomenal work through some of your experiments. It's like you just are too good, you can't be denied, right? Like the firm would be silly to put a damper on your ideas. This idea of co-conspirators, that shows up in a lot of different realms actually, is when you've got an idea or you're trying to create a movement or an initiative, try to spend some time with some early adopters so it's not just you trying to push it forward. Now that I have to admit though, that last piece that you said there about allowing other people to perhaps take a little bit of credit and gain some status for something that wasn't their idea, that's pretty high order thinking. I mean, you really have to be in control of your ego to let that one go. And I'm wondering if part of the trick there is trying to focus more on the outcome and the purpose of your clever or creative idea more than who gets the credit. I mean, that might be a way to sort of trick the ego into being a bit more silent, but I could see that would be a hard one. Now, Shawn, I want to talk about some other concepts from the book that stood out. And there's a lot, we're not going to get to all of them today, but one of them was this idea of finding like obviously bad ideas that are actually good ideas, and that's useful for innovation. I'd like to understand that a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, if you want to find innovative ideas, I think the best place to find them are, number one, with the weirdos, the folks in their basement, the folks in their garages, the folks in their subreddits and the discords, and the weird areas of the internet or offline. And for many people, they might sound like terrible or bad ideas. But that's where you find the people that are passionate. That's where you find the people that are doing things differently. And it's funny because on the flip side to that, when I would often go to organizations and we'd have these brainstorming meetings, what would usually happen is that all the mediocre ideas would be at the table, and all the crazy ideas, the bold ideas, would be on the ground floor. They would, people would be like, that's too crazy. But those are the ideas that will give you the 10x improvement. The problem is that when we get in a room with each other, we are, I don't know if it's an insecurity or we don't want to look like an idiot. We have this defensive decision making that comes to play, and we often throw away the ideas that are obviously bad, but those might be the best ideas. And so that's why I encourage leaders and organizations to, embrace some of those bad ideas, because those are the ideas that might give us, a 10x improvement.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of motivation to not only protect the status quo, but for personal security. That could come in the form of job security as an example, right? Or status security. You mentioned status earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, we see that show up with the groups that we work with all the time. Is as soon as there becomes this notion that we might do something different that could render somebody else's former good idea less relevant or irrelevant, people start to question their place on the team, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons that Kodak killed the technology for the digital camera, and they had it right in their grip, right? And so we see it throughout history. It takes a special kind of leadership team to fight through that complacency or that protecting of security to embrace some of those ideas. So I feel
and let's be honest that many people don't want to make a bold decision because they don't want to look like an idiot. They don't want it to impact their job security or their status. And that's why people will pay, an exorbitant amount of money to pay for consultants to come in just so that they can point to them and be like, they made that decision, not me. And so we do all these irrational things in order to prevent us from looking like an idiot. And it's like, a silly example, because I'm a basketball fan, is that there's so many basketball players, they are terrible at free throw shots. I look at Shaq or Ben Simmons. If they only learned how to shoot underhanded, which is a statistically higher percentage of shooting a basketball or free throw, and just adopted that new practice of shooting it, then they would probably increase their percentages. Yet the reason why they don't want to do it, even though it's probably a better decision for them, is because they don't want to look like an idiot. And actually, I think Shaq even said, like, I would never do that, because even though he was, one of the greatest players of all time, he could have been the greatest, but he didn't choose to take that decision because he didn't want to look like a joke.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And so let's follow that. Let's keep following that train of thought. Not looking like an idiot, not wanting to avoid looking like a fool. But the other piece that comes out, Shawn, when you start to take more initiative in your life and be a little bit more bolder, is critics. Critics are everywhere, and it is easier to have exposure to those critics right now than it ever has been in the history of the world. There's actually no escape from it unless you throw your phone under the bed for the day. How does a person shut the critics out or learn to leverage that for motivation? I'm just so curious how you have done that in your life, and maybe how you have seen other people do it. Even some of the folks in the book had to do that all the time. Like, they were laughed at for their ideas, but they persevered. How does a person shut the critics out?
There's a chapter in a book called Disruption is a Joke. And it goes back to this idea that every single disruption or disruptor always starts as a joke. And then eventually the joke is really on us. Growing up in a South Asian household, and I think many people from an immigrant household have heard this line, which is, what will people say? It's the constant critic in your house. It's like, why are you doing this? What will the community say? What will our friends say? And so it prevents us from making, decisions that we want to make in life. And I've had to grapple this my entire life. I mean, I still hear it today, but ultimately I've come to appreciate the line, what will people say? Because to me, it means that if people are talking about me, then that means that I'm doing something that's disruptive. I'm doing something that is getting attention, especially in a world where attention is so hard to get. And so I've come to embrace the term, what will people say? Because I've also realized that really no one is really thinking about us that much, right? Really people don't care about us that much. And so those two things are near and dear to my heart. And I believe that part of the reason why people don't want to become innovators is because really they're afraid of what people will say. And so what we've seen throughout history, and this is what I really highlight in the bold ones, that most of them and the vast majority of them do their thing without listening to the critics, and they embrace the fact that they might be talking about them. So Yeah, that's what I'd say at that.
Yeah, I could see a person using that as leverage, as motivation, right? Prove them wrong, which only lasts for so long. I think you got to be more compelled towards what you're trying to achieve and the change you're trying to make. But I think a little bit of motivation. I mean, Tom Brady fueled that. Michael Jordan, I mean, he was on display in The Last Dance. I mean, look how he fueled
Yeah.
the motivation of the critics. I mean, he even made up confrontations that didn't even exist, and he did that for 20 years. So, Shawn, there's this other piece in the book that has really got me thinking. So, for example, when I put out a tweet, if I get more than 25 likes on it, I get pretty excited. And it's kind of a random occurrence when that happens. But in the book, you talk about this concept of hot streaks, and that a hot streak is not necessarily something that's just left up to chance. You can engineer these for yourself. Wondered if you could talk a little bit about what does a hot streak look like, and what are some things a person can actually do to make these happen in their life?
Yeah. This is one of my favorite concepts of the book. How do you engineer a hot streak? I am so fascinated with this topic, and I feel like I wish this was another book that I wrote, which is analyzing people's hot streaks. There's a great piece of research that came out in 2021 with individual named Deshin Wang and his team of scientists, where they analyzed all these prolific innovators throughout history, and they use artificial intelligence to analyze some of the best film directors, artists, creatives. And what they realized is that the reason why these individuals have hot streaks, the reason why they are so prolific, is because they went through these periods of what I will call wastefulness. They wasted their time. They went through years of exploration and experimentation, and they played, and then at some point they put it all together. They exploited their learnings, and that's how they generated their hot streaks. The other thing that was interesting about this study was that the reason why most people have one hot streak is actually what we talked about before, is that you get rich, fat, and lazy based on, what you were successful at. And it's very difficult for people to have another hot streak. And to have another hot streak, you have to continuously explore. You have to be able to remain the rookie and to continuously be hungry. And that's how you generate your next hot streak. And so in the book, I profile some individuals that are having a hot streak now, or have had a hot streak. And, whether it's, Judd, I look at somebody like Judd Apatow. Now, Judd Apatow in the early 2000s had this unbelievable string of movies that came out, Superbad, you just remember that era of Will Ferrell and all those guys, Jonah Hill, and all of them being in Apatow's movies. And what Apatow did in the 90s was he explored. He was doing stand-up comedy, he was directing, he did Geeks and Freaks. He did all these different things, and at some point he put it all together with his string of movies. And it's interesting that now Judd Apatow's an amazing director. He hasn't been able to replicate that hot streak and sustain that hot streak because maybe the market changed and maybe people changed. But it's interesting that he was able to have these hits. And how was he able to do that? So I'm just fascinated with people and these strings. I don't know if you've seen this in your life or other people that you have observed, but this ability for them to just have hit after hit after hit, or be in this this hot zone, it's really incredible.
Yeah, staying relevant, it's very hard. And I have so much admiration for anybody that's just trying. And then the next level up would, if you have a window of success, but to be able to maintain it or sustain it. The Shania Twain documentary that just came out, I forgot how wildly successful she was over a period of 12 to 15 years. Just shattered all kinds of recording artist records. And so she had to do that. And I'm also fascinated by stories we can take from the wild. I learned recently that insects, for example, like ants, like carpenter ants and probably army ants, when they've got abundant food sources, they're still sending out exploratory foot soldiers to find other sources of food, even though that there's no quantifiable reason why they should be exploring, but they still are. And then every time they find another food source, they drop little scents on the way back so that they can find the trail to that food source if their existing one runs out. And it reminded me a little bit about hot streaks as I was reading your book. And I think that's the key. You hit on it, is that we got to find little ways to just be firing little experiments, even though we might be really successful as it stands in our lives today.
100% agree. And I, admittedly, I feel like I'm in a hot zone right now. And while I'm in the hot zone, I think to myself two things. And it's a dichotomy, because number one, I want to double down. I want to make sure that I maximize the fruits of my labor now. At the same time, I'm just hungry. I'm curious. I want to explore. I want to try new ways of doing things. And so there's always this tension. And because I want to have my next hot streak, right? Or how do I sustain this one? So there's like a little bit of, you never really know, right? There's a little bit of intuition. But I think the idea of continuously exploring your passions is something that I've seen, it's really how you have your best life. It's to continue to be an explorer and to be curious around the world. And I want my kids to see that dad is, 80 years old, but he's still curious. He's still learning. He's still reading. He's still seeing what other people are doing. Like to me, that's really important for my kids to see that.
Yeah. And Shawn, I know this is certainly related to this piece of the conversation, but a fundamental question around innovation is, where is the world going? And so how do the best innovators have those answers? Like, I think of Steve Jobs, and I think, like, how did he know that the world was going to want their life in a handheld device, and that we were going to want our music to get out of Discmans and Walkmans and into the palm of our hands? Like, how do you figure out where the world's headed?
If I knew where the world was headed today, I would be there. But I'm here with you right now. So it's such a difficult question. Obviously, I asked this question in the book, and this is something I'm asking all the time. I think one of the best ways of trying to figure out where the world is going is to not be so romantic about the rabbit hole that you are in, but really pay attention to what's happening across every field, whether it's, finance and media, entertainment and politics and beyond. It's seeing what people are interested in and consuming. I feel like sometimes when you ask people, it's not as great. It's not as good as actually observing people, in the wild. And so if you really want to see where the world is going, you have to be what I call a deep generalist, somebody with range, somebody that has an understanding of what's happening across different domains. This is how you prepare yourself for and really find out where the world is going. So I try to do that in my own personal life. Like, I am just curious and interested about every single sector. If you see the podcasts that I listen to, it's in every single direction. My interests are about history and pop culture and science and economics and beyond. And I'm trying to sense where the future is, because I have no idea. I can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, but at least what we've been seeing is that the lines are blurring across every single domain. And if you just look up and you listen and pay attention, it's probably a better indicator of where the world is going.
Shawn, what are the downsides of a disruptive culture? And like a more shallow example is, just because we can build a fridge with an iPad on it and I can change the temperature from my phone from an airplane, should we? And the other part of this, though, that I wonder about, because I experienced this myself, if we were having this conversation 5 or 6 years ago, I would tell you that one of my greatest fears was being disrupted. That something wonderful that we had built as an organization could be blindsided and rendered irrelevant. And I used to worry about that in an unhealthy way. The pandemic changed that for me. So now I kind of think, well, if anything was going to put us out of business, it was going to be that. So we're survivors and we'll figure it out. So I have a lot more confidence now to ride the wave of change at least I think, as I feel today. But I do wonder if there are some unintended negative consequences of a disruptive mindset or culture.
It depends. It depends on how you frame it. I believe that having a disruptive mindset is healthy. There's a great line called Memento Mori that the Romans used. It's remember you will die. That's what it means. And it's this idea that actually the one of the origins is that when the Roman general would parade down the street after Rome's military victories, there would be a slave in the back of the chariot that would whisper in the ear of the general, Memento Mori, which is remember you will die. And it's to remind the general that life is short. It's to remind the general that even on their highest day, the day that bestowed them the most status, that tomorrow is not given. And I believe that having a disruption mindset is this idea that not remember you will die, but it's really that disruption is inevitable, that this will not last forever. What is successful today may not be successful tomorrow. And I think that's a healthy thing, because if you can remind yourself that you will get disrupted every day, it's a reminder that you need to continuously innovate and be nimble and flexible and experimental. And to me, I think what's more detrimental is remaining in the status quo. It's remaining in the middle. To me, that's the most dangerous place to be today. And so if you can continuously remind yourself that this is not forever, then it allows you to explore. It allows you to be curious around the world, about the world. And so I think it's actually a healthy thing to remind yourself that you will be disrupted. But most people think as disruption as this negative thing, or most people look at disruption as a pessimistic concept. But to me, it's really healthy to think about death every single day, because it's a reminder that life is amazing and you should continuously explore and try new ways of doing things.
Yeah, memento mori. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to write that down. That's a great story. I mean, I think it's further evidence why people should do whatever they can to fall in love with their craft, to fall in love with the process, rather than being focused on the outcome or the destination. Because I think if you're focused on the craft, if you're focused on the habits and the process, it's going to lead you naturally to change. As you learn more about yourself, you learn more about the thing that you're interested in. You're going to be way more familiarized with trends in the marketplace, I think, as you do that. So that's a great way to phrase it. Shawn, I want to give some advice now to your former employers at Deloitte, that maybe they could have embraced you a little bit more as you became disruptive. Because here's the story. I hear it on both ends. I hear I'm kind of in that age group now where I'm still young enough to be still in that younger category of conversation, but I'm old enough that I'm now thinking about the way that we used to do things back when I went to school. So I'm in this sort of this precarious age. And on the one hand, I hear managers talk about younger people coming into the workplace and not having respect for the way that things have been done. So they're coming in guns a-blazing, and I'm sure they have great intentions, but they're ruffling some feathers because there doesn't seem to be respect for the generations that have come before them. And in a lot of cultures, like, being old is equated with wisdom. And in North American society, especially, we seem to treat elderly people as though they're unqualified or unfit for societal contribution. And I have to think there's a bit of a middle ground here, but I wonder if you could comment a bit on how can the generational gap be more productively meshed?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the piece around Deloitte, I love Deloitte and I love working there. And actually, the reason why I left there was because I was part of this new breed of folks that, I started to gain my own power because I was able to create my own IP, my own assets, my own content. And I think I was part of this new world order where there are individuals that are creating power through other methods. And mainly it's through content. and creating their brand in new ways, which is actually part of the reason why I wrote the book. And so they couldn't. And most organizations today, not even them, like the majority of companies today have no idea how to compensate, how to frame, how to keep these individuals that are stars. And I think that's going to be a problem over the next decade. To your point around the wisdom piece, I think there's two sides to it. Number one is that many leaders don't have a rookie mindset. They don't understand that the world is changing around them. They don't understand that there are new ways of doing things. There are new technologies that are coming out that will completely disrupt them. And there are young people that have not spent a lick of time within their organization, but that's why you hire ambitious, creative, innovative individuals to help push you along. So as a leader, you have to continuously have this rookie mindset. At the same time, expertise can be very valuable. Being an expert in a particular industry allows you to see problems that perhaps other people that are new to the industry can't see, and vice versa. So, of course, the marriage has to be symbiotic. You have to be able to, as a leader, to be vulnerable. You have to be, as a leader, to step down and be a rookie. And if you're joining an organization, of course, you have to respect the organization that you are part of. Part of being a bold one is not to come in guns blazing and to change everything, right away. It's actually to work with others. It's to build momentum around your particular ideas. It's to get the old guard on board around what you are doing. Otherwise, you're not going to go far at all. You're not going to be able to be a bold one unless you have people, in the back seat. So, there has to be a marriage between both of them, but I'm actually gonna put more. I'm gonna be a little bit more critical around the old guard, because what I see most often is that the old guard is not willing to let go of their status, of their seniority, of their expertise around how an industry works, and it's upon them to embrace new ideas. So I guess I disagree that the younger generations coming in and being disrespectful. Perhaps that happens. I don't see it as often.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your perspective on that, and it is something that I hear people talking about a lot. And my response always I was going to say, Shawn, my comment back always is how curious are you? Are you leading with curiosity or not? Are you leading with curiosity or judgment? Because I find that as soon as people start to reflect on that question, they realize, you know what, the problem's with me. It's not that it's not the new upstart hotshot recruit that we hired out of university. It's me. I'm judging, and I'm not taking that step to try to understand where they're coming from.
Well, I was going to ask you, because you're certainly a leader that obviously leads with curiosity. You're a leader that is willing to be vulnerable, and I think my belief is that the most innovative leaders in the world are the most vulnerable. The folks that can step back and say, I don't know. They're the leaders that can step back and say, help me. Did you have this realization of that's how a leader I should be, or did that happen over time? How has your leadership journey changed to where you are now, where you are? Now I haven't worked for you, but from your discussions that you have and some of the things that you put out in the world, it certainly feels and looks like that you are a leader that really not only cares about their people, but are vulnerable enough to let others lead and to empower others to lead. So I want to ask you that.
Yeah. So my answer is that journey, that process is ongoing and will never be done. I'm a huge fan of the phrase "be better, not perfect." And being better doesn't mean a straight line, and so I mess up a lot. I'm fortunate that I work with colleagues that I have deep trust and admiration with, and I think that goes both ways. And so I get a lot of critical feedback from people that I care about a lot, that are colleagues. And I think that one of the things that has helped me is learning the research about what great leadership looks like. So I'm grateful for people like you. I'm grateful for anybody that has dedicated their life to understanding the nuance, the data, the science, the patterns and themes that separate great, exceptional performance from average and mediocre. And I think what I've learned about myself as well along this journey is my self-awareness has certainly gone up. And my default is I want people to do it my way. I want people to do it the way that I've had success with. When somebody has a counterpoint to my opinion, my default is defensiveness. And so I have to work very hard to overcome those things. And I think that I'm getting better at that. And now one of the things I think I am really good at, though, is when I realize I've shown up in a way that was unbecoming, I'll come back and apologize, acknowledge, and own it. I still have to work more on my mindset in the moment. That's one of my biggest growth areas for my own personal leadership, is to be more in control of my emotions in the moment so that I can turn defensiveness into curiosity.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Shawn, I want to pull the veil off of you for a second here, if you'll allow me. You're known for being so positive, upbeat, optimistic, energetic. What sort of things get you down?
What gets me down? I'm certainly somebody that is an optimist. I do think I do trust many people. It's in my nature. Certainly when it comes to work, I think what gets me down is that when you work on something really hard, you work on a particular project, and for whatever reason it doesn't come through, it doesn't work out. They put a project on the shelf. Like I experienced that so much within consulting, and it really gets you down because you're working on something so hard with people, and nothing comes out of it. It's like, what am I doing with my life? So that certainly gets me down. I am somebody that is like, I think of myself as a good friend, and I consider myself somebody that puts a lot of time into my friendship. So, when people are, they're hurt by something I said, or they're hurt by something that I did, and I know about that really, it really nags at me. And so I I go over and above to try to, whether it's resolve the situation or really to understand where they're coming from. So that really, gets at me. And there's certain friends where, maybe they're a little bit more sensitive and you're a little bit more cautious, but I really want to make sure that I'm a good friend to folks. Yeah, I think that's about it. I think also just having kids changes your mentality on things. I hate to see my kids down on anything. Like, luckily they're pretty optimistic, but if I see them down, like, that really sort of impacts me, and obviously trying to understand where they're coming from and understand why they're down. So yeah, that's what I'd say. That's a very interesting question.
Well, you bring up your kids, and I can't help but wonder how much you are at odds or in conflict with yourself about how you're going to parent versus what is the best experience to create future generations of disruptors. Like, we want to protect our kids and make them safe, and yet exploration and learning from trial and error and screwing up and failing is an essential part of being a bold one. So how does that line up with how you parent?
There's recently a great Twitter thread that came out, and somebody's like, yeah, I'm becoming a new dad. Can I get some advice from like the old dads out there? And it was like a 1,000 thread deep Twitter thread that I just consumed. I devoured. Because the reality is that I don't know how to be a great dad. I don't know how to be a great parent. I'm 6 years into this. I got 2 kids. I got 1 on the way anytime now. And I have no idea how to be a great parent. But yet I also know where the world is going, which is it has to be a world where you have to be innovative and creative and imaginative and intuitive. And so for me, like, I think when it comes to my kids, I think I want them to explore more and to be willing to take risks, and to try new things. To me, that's a general construct. We live in a generation today where we do coddle our kids. Like, we're in a society where we have coddled our children, whether it's letting our kids play outside, or walk to school on their own, or to do things on their own. I believe that there's a general coddling of society that's happening, and I think that's preventing us from being more creative and imaginative. And so I have to balance that, right? This is what society thinks, and then where I want my kids to go. So I don't know. Like, I don't have a clear definition. I don't know how to do this. And if anybody out there can give me some really great parenting advice, I'm always like inhaling it. I'm trying to get it. So maybe listen, you're years a little bit years ahead of me. So give me some advice.
Well, I am okay with kids failing. I've been okay with my son failing and learning from those mistakes. I think the biggest challenge for me is no two people will ever want to parent the same, right? And so I'm a single parent, and so I didn't raise my son in the same household, right? We didn't have a nuclear family, and so there presents some challenge there with having alignment on what the values are and what are some of the rules and the non-negotiables. And I think his mother and I both have good sets of values, and we have rules of engagement, but they're different. And so I think that's the hardest thing, is trying to get some alignment as you try to co-parent your children. Is in my humble experience, and I don't consider myself an expert in parenting by any stretch, and I don't know if anybody does. But thanks for that, Shawn. The last question I have for you. You left Deloitte in 2018. You had built this wonderful career, started doing your own keynotes. 2019 was, by all accounts, a remarkable year for you. Like, you just shot out onto the scene and were gaining notoriety. And how many keynotes did you deliver in 2019?
Probably like, I don't know, 60 or 70 keynotes. Yeah.
More than one a week. 2020, you would have been booked more than at any other point in your life. All of a sudden, in the middle of March, it's announced that no more live events. And I couldn't let you go without asking you, what were those first few days like, knowing that everything you were looking forward to in 2020 was no more?
Yeah, I love asking people about their March 2020. I was lucky because to me, the pandemic was a tragedy, right? And I learned very early, when my father passed away. He passed away on like, he was a tax accountant, and he passed away right before the tax deadline. And I remember there were all these clients like wondering, like, what are we going to do with his taxes? And I remember walking in the day after my dad died, walking into his office and like kind of, figuring it out, like, handling his business. He had over 200 clients. And that taught me that tragedy can actually be an opportunity, that tragedy can spur innovation. And actually, when the pandemic hit, I continue to have a positive mindset. I was like, we're going to get through this. We're going to figure some way out of this. We're going to try to innovate. This is the greatest time to innovate. And so I just went to work. Like, I just did what I did with my dad. I went to work. And I'm blessed that I have that mindset, that when everything is gone to crap, that you're like, okay, how do I get out of this? How do I innovate? And yeah, that's what we did. From a content perspective, like, immediately, like in April, we got in a theater, and we started shooting content and keynotes, and started doing content in during the pandemic, when nobody was doing it at a very high quality level. And we just kind of ran from there. And so I just know that when things are down, and they will be down again at some point in my life, is that the best way to approach that is to get your stuff up and to think how can we do things differently? How can we keep moving? And so the tragedy of my father helped me do that. And so that's what I'd say that.
Shawn, thanks for sharing that. When I think of bold ones, as I was reading the book and even prior to that, I wouldn't have called them bold ones, but I will forevermore. I think of people that challenge the limits, that make the impossible possible. I think of people like Roger Bannister, who was the first human being to break the 4-minute mile barrier. People had tried for centuries and done some really wild things, and eventually the human race just gave up, thinking that a man was not capable of running a mile in less than 4 minutes. Roger Bannister did it, and now it's common that high schoolers will do it. And Shawn, the reason I share that story is forever in my mind, you will be a bold one. And I know I'm not the only one. And because you pushed the limits, and especially in the pandemic, of what people thought was possible, what connection could look like, what adaptation could look like, what reinvention was, that we could make it out. And the thousands and thousands of people that you helped navigate the pandemic with a more positive mindset will never tell you personally that you did it, but I want to tell you that you did that for countless people, because I know you did it for me. And so I never told you this before, but almost every single day when you would post something, it was a reminder that, we can do more, we can be better. We don't have to sit and wait for this thing to pass. We can use it and we can leverage it. So lots of things that we did, your influence and your courage is sprinkled all over that. And I will always be grateful to you for that. So this has been such a pleasure, Shawn, to host you today. I've loved this conversation, and I'm so proud of you, and I'm a cheerleader for you. And I know you're just getting started, but congratulations on everything that you have done so far, and just keep it going, my friend.
Well, thank you so much. Those were some of the kindest words that I've ever heard, and I really appreciate your support over the years, and just seeing you grow as a leader, as an individual, and it's amazing to call you a friend now. So thank you so much for having me. It's an honor, truly, like what you are doing here and elevating the production and the guests that you are having. It's been amazing to see. So truly blessed and honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Been a pleasure, Shawn. We'll see you again soon, I'm sure. And in the meantime, I hope everybody listening to this conversation will be encouraged and motivated just to take one tiny step in the direction of their own bold move. And we can't wait to see what you're up to, everybody. Until next time, this has been Jeff Tetz with Shawn Kanungo on Unleashed.
If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever your favorite podcasts are found. And if you're part of a leadership team and you know that your organization is capable of even better performance, please reach out to us at unleashresults.com for a conversation and learn more about how we might help unleash the potential of your team and organization.